Hello and welcome to Being Anxiety Free. My name is Emma Upton and I'm here to spill all the tea on what it actually means to choose out of anxiety and be free. So join me today as we learn who we're here to be, what we're here to do, so that our body of unique work coded in the DNA of our existence gets to flow through. Welcome to today's episode. Episode 25. If I know my trigger, I can own it. That's what the premise around this. I spent a big amount of time trying to avoid triggers. I see it all the time in the world about like trigger warning, trigger coming up, and I get it. Like harrowing things happen to us as human beings, and maybe if we're caught off guard and we're not quite ready to receive the trigger, it can do all sorts of things to our nervous system. Like I get it, but I have trained my brain to such a point now, I'm on the hunt for triggers. I'm like, do you know why? Because if I am being triggered by something, it means I'm not grounded, I'm not centered, I'm not in the essence of who I am. So if I'm not in that space, I'm out there. I'm in the ideal self. And if I'm out there, I'm not living out who I'm here to be, what I'm here to do. There's a disconnect. So if I can go through life realizing, I'm being triggered, that's a good thing. And does that mean it feels comfortable? Nope. I've made complete peace with the fact that this world does not feel comfortable. We want it to, don't we? The nature of being a human, all any of us want. When I'm navigating with my husband, what we all want is just an easy, simple life where everything goes the way that we think it should go, and there's not, and like that's what the nature of being human is. But that's not the reality of our existence. And the quicker we come to terms with that fact, the easier our life becomes. I'm obsessed with the idea of life gets to be easy, and the notion behind that being like life doesn't get simple all of a sudden just because you become really prolific in understanding your brain. Life will have the same complexities, but you just navigate them in a different way. You can navigate them in a way that you're like, oh God, this feels lighter. Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, I'm triggered. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's all of those things. But you know what? I have this power inside me now that means that I can navigate this. I can navigate this in a way that I would not have been able to before. So I wanted to share with you some of the different ways that triggers present. I think we can get stuck. I know I get stuck in kind of becoming, because I'm heightening my awareness, like I'm here. I know I'm here for a big purpose. My job is to figure out where my human brain is getting in my way of that big purpose and moving it out of my periphery. So I'm becoming more and more familiar with being like, that triggers me. Okay. I can see myself wanting to, because I'm avoidance, running, hiding. Like that's my technique when I'm triggered. So I can notice that now. I'm more familiar, I'm on the lookout, but there's always nuances. There's always new nuances that sit underneath things. So understanding, number one, before I share what they are, understanding that being triggered is part of life. When we notice our typical behaviors around feeling triggered, and that being like, this is not comfortable for me. I don't want this to be happening. I'm having this, what feels like an involuntary response inside my body, and it doesn't feel nice and I want it to stop. It's that. Now, these are some of the ways that we are triggered. Sometimes being triggered is out in the world and super obvious. Like going to a party where you know Uncle Knobhead will be and he makes you feel all kinds of yuck because of that thing you did ages ago. You're triggered, quite obviously. And other times, you don't know what in the world's happening, which sounds like I feel super shitty and I have absolutely no blooming idea why. You're triggered here too, and not knowing why is actually fine. Stand down, Bob, who wants to overthink and figure everything out. It's like, stand down, triggered, I don't get it, I don't know why, but I know this physical response inside me is telling me something. Something's in my way here. And that's it. We get to a point where I was like, that's a good thing. Like, let me eradicate that. Regardless of its origin, what happens every time, whether you know what's going on or not, is that some external thing triggers an internal emotional response, which you express in one of two ways. And this is what I want to draw our attention to here. Like, it's a good reminder for me. Number one, express the poop. I haven't explained about the poop and the puke, have I? Okay. Express the poop, puke, poop trigger outwardly for the whole world to see. All sneakily, just the people that you want to see. Like, sometimes we do that as well. Like, we're nice to everybody else. Mums are really good at this. Like, mums are really good, like, yeah. Or teachers. Teachers are really good at it as well. So, it can be an outward trigger. Something happens, you feel a feeling, and it comes out like puke, like poop is coming out of you and it's going out into the world. So that can look like sarcasm, shouting. It can look like physically running away. It can look like shaking. It can having a panic attack, physical aggression. Like, there's loads of different ways. If you think about when you feel a certain way, what physical response can you track happening? Is it a puke poop where it's just out in the world for everybody to see? There's no escaping it. Or maybe just that one person who you want to see it and then you put on that face there. And that's okay. Like, knowing that and seeing where we're doing it is power. Or there's a second kind of way to internalize, swallow the puke poop trigger. This is my favorite. Subtleties. It leads to resentment. This kind of way, you don't get it out and there's an explosion and it's gone. It breeds resentment. If you feel a lot of resentment in your life and like you're annoyed by people and they grow on you and they grind on you but you don't say anything, you probably are like me and you internalize. You swallow that puke and that poop that just wants to come out. So ruminating, festering, playing out scenarios in your head over and over again. Oh, next time I'll do this. Next time Bob gets hold of that and he's off. Bitterness, resentment, jealousy. When we get familiar with what kind of response we have to triggers, we start to own our power again. We start to get this realization of like, oh, okay, well, I'm having what feels like an involuntary response to this scenario. And it's depleting me, whether I am projecting it out to the world and they're all getting it, or whether I'm internalizing it and eating it and poisoning myself, essentially. I'm triggered and this response is happening. That awareness is everything. When people, when I'm working with people and they message me and be like, I'm triggered and I don't know what to do. It's like that awareness, knowing that, seeing that, that is everything. That is power in itself. That is inner power in itself. The trigger-free Tuesday work that I'm discussing here, I, strangely shock horror, feature a toad to explain how all of this works. I'll show you how he joins forces with Bob the monkey as they continue to search for outside answers, which they don't find, of course, as your answer is tucked beautifully inside you at the end of the rainbow road. But even knowing this doesn't stop you from continuing to seek out from the outside world right along with them. So then you get triggered. This is what I see. We get triggered. We have this response in the outside world. We're like, this doesn't feel comfortable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate the world outside of me in an attempt to stem that trigger from happening. So we go out into the world trying to think that we can control and contort and manipulate, essentially, which doesn't feel like a nice word, but that's what it is. Like, everything around us in the hope that, oh, if I change all of this around me, if I leave, or if I navigate this or navigate that, then I've eradicated that problem and life will be good. Life does not work that way, does it? Because that trigger finds you in a different way. So even if we leave a relationship, if we have clients in our world and we just like, oh, I'm ending this container here because this is not working for me, we will attract somebody in our world that has a similar kind of energy. Why? Because that's how the universe works. We're here for something big. You're a big deal. Like, just know that. And so those things that are coming at us, that trigger us and make us have these what feel like involuntary responses, are actually little markers of like, this is in your way. The way that your brain is thinking about all of this is getting in the way of your purpose. It's getting in the way of who you're here to be. So unless you're going to address this, unless you're going to be like, oh my God, this keeps happening and I keep drawing these kind of people and situations and things towards me and I keep having this same triggered response, that happening again and again and again is a message of, oh, this is in the way. I get excited now when I see that and I'm like, this is not a coincidence. Like, it just can't keep coming. These people can't, these situations can't keep coming. And the words, what I don't know in this moment is like, how do I navigate this differently? Because I don't know. Most of our triggers are inherited through doing the same thing in the same ways over and over and over again. We get to define and say in that moment, like, oh God, there's a different way of doing this. I know that there is. Right now, the only thing I've got is awareness of what I don't want. Now, Frances will be really loud most often in these situations because she's like, oh, okay, Mrs. Mindsets, going about like, figuring out your life and life's purpose and stuff. Good luck with this one, because you've had this trigger since before you were born. You've inherited this through the bloodline of women that you coexist with. Like, good luck with that. And she will take that on to give you a hard time, because that's her job. That's what she does. She's trying to keep us safe. It's not helpful. So when we're noticing these triggers and we're trying to own them and we're trying to be like, okay, there's something here. It's blocking me from seeing this. She's like, nah, you're just rubbish. Nah. It's not going to happen. Our job is to notice her whilst noticing the triggers. Like, you can see why not everybody in the world does this. Noticing the triggers whilst noticing your brain wanting to be mean to you about being triggered. When you can do that, like the power, you're like, ooh, I'm being triggered and my brain is being a bitch to me, like that. Okay. So if I want the change, I see the trigger, I can see how unkind my brain's being to myself. So what am I going to do? Am I going to fall back into the habits and the patterns that come really naturally to me because I've done them for so long? Those moments are the places that we decide, you know what, no, I'm going to own this. I don't know what to do with it. But I'm going to watch it and I'm going to own it. And then I'm going to watch my brain not being kind to me about it. And I'm going to be okay with it all. Because I know the more I practice this awareness of seeing the trigger, wanting to do something different and not giving myself a hard time about not feeling like I can right now, we make space. Every time the trigger and we hit and we're like, okay, Frances, thank you for your input, but it's not helpful. It's like we create a vacuum, and the universe hates a vacuum. It wants to fill it. And if you're not going to be filling it with the unkindness and then being mad at yourself for not being a good enough human or whatever it is that we fill our brains with, the universe starts to fill in that space, being like, well, we can give you more like good stuff. And it gets easier. So you go to the party where Uncle Nobbit is, where he did the things that make you feel a certain kind of way. And you're like, oh, that's on him. That's actually nothing to do with me. How interesting. And your brain is like, oh, let's have this visceral response. Let's have this intense response. Let's do it. And you're like, how about we don't? How about that we can just, you know, how everybody's like, oh, it's just a reflection of them. It's not anything to do with you. It's like, well, that's all well and good, but it really feels like it's me until we're able to make this space and look in and be like, oh, no, it's not. It's him. It's all him. My response was coming from me and how I felt about him and his behaviors. But actually, when I can make that space between the trigger and how I'm showing up with it, I can look at the whole situation really differently. Oh, like, I don't want to choose to be around him. Like, no, thank you, really. But I can be for a family party and literally everybody's there and he's going to be there. I'm not missing out on that. If I want to go home, like, fine, he's there. Cool. When we start to recognize and realize that our triggers are not something for us to run from, actually our triggers are something to dive into and be like, I'm going to own this. And I can't right now because it's intense, it's a lot. Frances has all kind of judgments and rules about what it means, about me, about them and all the things. But I'm going to watch all of that and I'm going to stay determined that there is going to come a point and it's going to be in my near future. And it happens in a moment. Sometimes it happens so bloody quickly. It's beautiful. It's going to be in my near future that situation is just not going to be the one. I'm going to move through it and I'm going to love it. And when we do that and we move through those triggers, on the other side of that is a quantum shift. On the other side of that is this elevated, raised perspective of like, oh, this is how the world works. How mad is this? So I encourage you, wear your oranges, have your tangerines, scents, go about looking for those triggers with this intention of owning it, with this intention of, this is not going to determine how I feel. I refuse. Thank you for being here.